Kamala Harris is no Barack Obama, a person could say. A person could say that while there are some superficial similarities between Kamala in 2024 and Obama in 2008, the differences perhaps are even more important, and those differences do not favor her. And yet, she is the tribune of a movement of the progressive political party in our country, because she's a black woman. Black woman? Why is it that the blacks, I'm going to put it in quotes, the blacks who ascend to the highest echelon of national political office aren't, I was almost going to say, really black? That's wrong. They are elective black. They opted in. They had choices. They opted in. They, to a certain degree, are choosing blackness, performing blackness. Wokeness is dying. Wokeness is taking body blow after body blow after body blow. Heads are rolling from presidents of Ivy League universities, and laws are being passed at the state level that people push back against, I think, to some degree, reflect a weariness in the populace with all of this race talk. And if she loses this election, that would be another nail in the coffin of woke racism. Hello, everybody out there. This is Glenn Loury. You have tuned in to The Glenn Show with John McWhorter, my conversation partner every other week, sponsored by the Manhattan Institute. John teaches at Columbia and writes for the New York Times. And I'm on the faculty here at Brown University and am John Paulson Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. So we're back, John, a week off the cycle. We had a little change in the calendar last week, but here we are in our bi-weekly. What's up? What's going on?
Well, I, of course, am thinking about the rapid ascent of Kamala Harris into the national consciousness and what it means. And what I find especially important on this is that there's the obvious parallel with our first discussion way back in the 1850s, where we were talking about the Obama phenomenon and how I was so excited because I thought it was going to be really special that there was possibly going to be, and after a while was clearly going to be, a black president. And you weren't going for it. Now here we are with that again. And I'm older and maybe in some ways wiser. And so are you. I don't know if you feel you're wiser than back then. But what are you thinking of the fact that she could be the next president?
Okay. Well, I think it is a very significant, interesting, historic, profound statement that she could be the next president, because she damn well could be the next president. She's fortunate to be running against Donald J. Trump, whose limitations and flaws you are very well familiar with.
I've got an inkling, yes.
She's come almost from nowhere. I mean, the vice presidency is not nowhere. Of course it's not. But as I recall, until yesterday, her performance in the vice presidency was roundly denounced, not only by partisans on the other side of the aisle, but even by many Democrats who were quietly making it known that they thought she wasn't, the best, the strongest, the most capable person to be backing up Joe Biden, and wondered whether or not Biden's reelection prospects were hampered to some degree by her. I mean, all these jokes about Biden's insurance policy was Kamala Harris. Nobody's going to kick him out of the job if they think she's the one who's going to succeed him and all that kind of stuff. And now she's a tribune at the head of a movement, quote unquote, of people who are ecstatic, excited, ready to fight. When we fight, we win. It's Kamala, Kamala, Kamala all day long. I turn on MSNBC. It's Kamala, Kamala, Kamala. There's Kamala boosting everywhere I look. I open my inbox in my email. There's Kamala, Kamala, and now Tim Walz all day long. So how'd this happen? Where'd this come from? It's just a fascinating phenomenon. I mean, it's got to be like a historic, unprecedented kind of ascendancy. And it interests me. And of course, as a black guy, I'm interested in the racial dimension of this, the first black woman, et cetera. So I am watching with bated breath as this unfolds. And it's all compressed. The election is less than 3 months away.
Mm-hmm.
It's all happening, in an accelerated time scale. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I didn't give you the answer that you wanted. You wanted an evaluation of the candidate, I assume, and I suppose we can get to that. But I am intrigued by the drama of Kamala.
It is an intriguing drama, and I don't know. I'm not viscerally against her in any way, but I'm a little bit disturbed this time. I feel kind of like you did back in the day with Obama. I'm a little bit disturbed by the caliber and the tone of this excitement, given that 5 minutes ago she was discussed the way you're talking about, because frankly, it's all because she's a woman and she's black. And I think we can elide all the business of whether she's also Indian, et cetera. Her main identification is African American. She's a black woman. And if it weren't for that, I think people would be much, 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 much less excited. And it might surprise some people to know that I took that line on Obama at first, way back as early as 2007. I put it forth in various venues, including the New Republic, who I wrote for back then. Evaluate this Barack Obama person on the basis of who he is, what he's done, and what he promises to do, not just his color. And boy, did I take a drubbing for that. Talk about the comment section here. Some of the worst stuff I ever took, where it was the only time I've been criticized in that way and wondered, is this going to affect my media career? Where the people who commented in the New Republic and, made me sound like just a varmint, a scoundrel, an idiot, I'm condescending. How dare he say, one person said something vulgar, I think probably with the word creaming or something. How dare he say that? That's the only reason that I like Barack Obama, blah, 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 blah. But frankly, I was right then. That was it at first. But I got on the bandwagon. I started to think about what it would really mean for there to be a black president or black first couple. And we talked about that. And I did get excited about that. I thought that there were some there would be some value just in their sheer presence in such a position. And to an extent, I was disappointed, because what really happened is that they got in, and what you can call generically the three named people were desperate, because it was so obvious that it was significant that racism didn't keep a black man in office, and it happened twice. And I don't think they were desperate for their livelihood. They were desperate for their basic sense of psychological well-being. What are they if they can't, make it sound like 1863 has never passed? So, all these books and articles about how racism isn't gone, et cetera. But then life took care of things for them, because it went from there's this permanent glass ceiling on any truly serious black achievement, unless you're Colin Powell, to if you're black, you get killed by the police just for walking the wrong way or driving the wrong way. And that really takes off. We're now at the 10th anniversary of Ferguson, for example, and also Trayvon Martin. Early teens, we have that coming in. And so the idea is whether or not there's a black president, still existing while black will get you killed by the cops. And that's where we still are today. And so I'm done. But I feel like, let's say that Kamala gets in. Okay, we have a woman president and we have a black woman president. But I realize now that the three named people need that alarmist tone. And so it won't matter. We'll still have the cop issue, for example, and the overly racialized version of that we see. So maybe I'm also older, but I'm not as excited this time, because I can see that the Obamas normalized blackness as the top. She would just be more of it, and our discussion of race would remain distorted anyway. So,
how about this? How about 2007, 2008, Obama emerges? He gives that speech in 2004 at the Democratic National Convention that everybody is not a black America, not a white America, so whatever he said. He said it very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Mounted a campaign. I think you have to say he's an underdog running against Hillary Clinton in 2007, 2008 for the Democratic nomination.
Mm-hmm.
And he kicks her ass.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't do it in a day or a week. He does it as the culmination of a protracted intra-party contestation. He beats her out. He outmaneuvers her, the former First Lady of the United States of America, who is the first woman running with a really serious chance of getting elected president of the United States, loses out in a protracted intra-party contest to Barack Obama. He bests her. He puts together a campaign mechanism. It's $1 billion enterprise, pretty much from scratch. He hires and nurtures and sustains a staff of really competent and effective campaign people, and he gets himself elected president of the United States. He writes a best-selling book, Dreams from My Father, before he ascends to the presidency. And he has a vision about relations with Iran, for example. He goes to Cairo and he gives this really important speech shortly after he is elected. He is awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace in his first year as president of the United States. Kamala Harris is no Barack Obama, a person could say. A person could say that while there are some superficial similarities between Kamala in 2024 and Obama in 2008, the differences perhaps are even more important, and those differences do not favor her. And yet, she is the tribune of a movement of the progressive political party in our country. And she's a Black woman. Black.
Don't do that. But yeah, it's very superficial. I mean, but then again, most human beings are not political wonks. It's always about much, much more than what a person's actual policies are. And if all of those Black sorority sisters are excited about her because she's one of them, and she is, I mean, socially, some shared experiences, but if that means that they're going to come out and vote for her and they were going to be less likely to come out and vote for Biden, and it means that Trump doesn't become the president, well, that's the way the social history worked. But I don't know.
What does she stand for? Do you know?
Nobody knows. I'm not sure she knows. She's a politician, and she tilts left when she has to, and she tilts a little bit more rightward when it's convenient to. She doesn't seem to me to have any truly strong convictions like most politicians. She's a politician. She's a Democrat, but that's about it. But I don't think anybody really cares. I mean, okay, there is the abortion issue. That's very important. And she has been assigned that, and I'm sure she feels that very deeply. But in terms of having a vision, as we've said before, I don't think she's quite worked that out yet. But it's just what she is. And people, we've said this before, but I think it bears repeating. It's about the fact that there is a warm tribalism that most people feel. And of course, it's going to have to do with who becomes the president. She looks like me, many people are thinking. And of course, no Chinese student, Chinese or Chinese American, ever says, I can't learn this or I didn't join this field because I didn't have a teacher who looked like me. They've got something behind them where they don't need the teacher to look like them. They feel like they belong to something that looks like them. But we Black people are encouraged to think the person has to look like me. We're getting this in the Olympics as well. And so, she looks like them. She moves like them. She can use a little Black dialect like them. And therefore, that means they are going to support her for president because it's time for somebody like that to be on top, even though we've already had it happen before. It's not deep. It really isn't. I will be interested to see what she has to say when she does an actual press conference. I wonder what she's going to come up with to present as what she is. And, Glenn, maybe she'll become something. Who knows? I mean, despite the fact that many people seem to think she's not the brightest bulb on the tree, I don't get it. She's clearly very intelligent. And she just really hasn't had time to become anything because she was too busy being, a vice president who, one, had not been assigned enough things, and two, I don't think was too terribly interested in the job. But let's see what happens. But all that smiling, is she happy? And is she happy because she might be about to become president, or is she happy because there are things she wants to do? But showbiz and politics, always, especially today.
Okay, I know this is wrong. I resent her having been foisted on us in the way in which it happened, coming out of as it were, nowhere. Of course, she was vice president, and of course, she was the heir apparent. On the other hand, for the reasons that I've already stated, there was something less than fully compelling about her. My own theory is that the party elders, seniors, envision a train wreck if she were not to be the candidate based on intra-party squabbling about that. It's first Black woman, and you're going to pass her over. On the other hand, an open contestation for the secession of Joseph Biden would have put her in a position where she might not have prevailed given her weaknesses, and that would have created a problem for the party. So they circumvented that. That is, they circumvented a democratic process of selecting their candidate. And I feel like I've been played a little bit. That I'm being manhandled a little bit as a citizen. I'm having something happen that is the deep structure of the hidden hand of power playing itself out, as opposed to some transparent process of deliberation. And then, I mean. And yet I feel a little bit guilty for feeling like that, John. I feel like I should
Why?
be more enthusiastic. Well, because somehow the right thing to do for our democracy and for history's sake is to get behind this woman, the first Black woman to arise to the position of president of the United States. And my resentment of the process on the Democratic side is the mirror image of a lack of sufficient criticism of the Republican side. As you know, I'm a Trump apologist. That's a well-known thing about me. I'm the guy
Yeah.
who says, yeah, but when everybody's piling on Trump, I say, yeah, but. How much of an idiot could he be if he's, et cetera? And what about the people who support him and so forth? And what about the issues? I mean, what about the tectonic plates of American politics shifting that we can see with this embrace of populism and nationalism and America firstism and whatnot? And don't the coastal elites have a lot to answer for in terms of the neglect of the problems of the working stiffs throughout the middle of the country, many of whom are flocking behind Trump? And you're going to just call those people deplorables and things like that? And besides, how could he have advanced to the extent that he has advanced if he were an idiot, if he were an imbecile, if he were et cetera, et cetera? And it's, so I'm that guy. So my lack of enthusiasm for Kamala, I said Kamala. I meant to say Kamala.
Well, and one. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to finish the sentence. Is a indirect indicator of my hidden, closeted sympathies for the other side. That was what I was going to say. And I'm ashamed of that. Let's talk about Ground News. It's a website and app that I use to stay better informed. They gather articles from over 50,000 news sources around the world and can help you read between the lines of media bias and break free from algorithms and echo chambers. Go to ground.news/Glenn Show to see how it works. My favorite Ground News feature is the blind spot feed. It shows you stories that are disproportionately reported by either the left or the right. It shows you what the media is focusing on and what they are not focusing on. Here's a headline you won't see from left-leaning sources. Disney exec is major Harris donor, raising debate conflict questions. Disney owns ABC News, where Harris and Trump are going to debate. And here's a headline you only see in left-leaning sources. Donald Trump flew on jet formerly owned by Jeffrey Epstein to campaign fundraisers. I'll let you decide which of these stories was more important to cover. Ground News also shows you important coverage details, such as how many news sources cover each story, the bias distribution across the left, right, and center, along with the reliability and ownership of the outlets reporting. You can't get this type of news analysis anywhere else. There's also something called My News Bias. It's a personal dashboard where you can get insight into your own reading habits. It shows you what stories you are ignoring. Ground News gives you an entire toolkit that helps you see the machinery behind the news and the biases at play in it. If you don't want to become a victim of propaganda this election, you really should check it out. My listeners who subscribe through my link will get 40% off the unlimited access Vantage plan, the same plan I use. So go to ground.news/Glenn Show or click the link in the video description to get Ground News for just $5 per month. I hope you'll join me in supporting an independent platform trying to bring facts, transparency, and trust back to the news.
Yeah, it's hard. She and I should say, by the way, sidebar. What do I mean by she's intelligent? Given all the memes out there where you can see that in interviews, often she'll sit and come up with some sort of word salad and laugh. I think people are being a little unfair on that. The word salad.
Obama was intelligent, man. I don't think this woman is intelligent like Obama was intelligent. Listening to them, such as I have been able to do.
I would say that when she does the word salad, it's because she hasn't formulated any real thoughts about something. And so she just kind of strings some words together because, she's a person who she did pass the bar exam, and many, 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 many people do not pass it the first time. And she has been around a while. So she just kind of says some stuff, and it's cute to take 13 seconds and to play it over and over and over again. But that doesn't mean that she's not smart. It means that she just hasn't really had an opportunity to think about things. Watch her when she cross-examines. She's a very smart cross-examiner. She gets up, she gets out, she gets under. That takes a certain something that not all people have. She's not great at answering questions she hasn't thought about, but she's very good at asking probing questions. That's been her main strength. No?
No, I mean, she's got her moments. That thing where she fronted Biden in the interview about busing. That thing where she asked, was it Kavanaugh? Did he know of any men who had their, healthcare things, preempted by politicians and whatnot?
But you think she lacks a certain gravitas compared to Obama?
Just haven't seen it. Yeah, I don't want to presume what I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen it, is what I'm saying.
You mean mainly because he writes a reflective autobiography? You mean what you see in that as opposed to, for example, her autobiography?
No, because of him on his feet. Him at a press conference, him responding to the issues of the day. Obama had a very good head on it, has a very good head on his shoulders, and that seemed to me to be evident from day one. He's articulate, he's incisive, he's perceptive, he's subtle. Obama, in his conduct of public expression. And it wasn't just the teleprompter. They called him teleprompter president because he read a good speech. And Obama did he performed a good speech. But, watching him over 8 years, juggling the balls and keeping everything going. And, I didn't agree with everything, a lot of stuff. I mean, he made mistakes, obviously. But the quality of his mind and the subtlety of his thinking, I think, were manifest in his performance both before and after being elected president. And I haven't seen that, but she hadn't had that much of a chance either.
He had to have spent more time preparing. He knew what he would be up against coming from where he came from. Whereas she, basically, think of her as a deer caught in the headlights. And that's my sense of her at this point. What do you do when all of a sudden you are possibly going to be president of the United States when 5 minutes before you were, if anything, kind of a national laughingstock, or nobody was thinking about you at all? That must be tough. And so it'll just be interesting to see what comes of her. And just there, we have to be careful about how we judge her on the basis of superficial things. Like, she's got that big laugh. And there are these memes that just show her, doing the cackling Kamala thing. And I think we need to revise our sense of what presidential behavior is. The idea that somebody can't be taken seriously because they have more than a chortle when they laugh. Why? Who said? Based on what theory? How does it make you less intelligent that your diaphragm titters more vigorously when you find something amusing, or you're trying to smooth things over with an audience, or the next thing is going to be? And I think I'm going to do a piece about this. this ridiculous outcry every time she code switches. So she's in front of an audience with black people in it, or it's going to happen with Southern people in it, and she'll drop an R at the end of a word, for instead of for. She has, she grew up as a black girl and then black woman. She has a black American capability.
Did she grow up as a black girl?
She did. She played with black kids in Oakland.
No, I mean, okay.
When she was growing up, that would have been the whole sense that she had of what's funny, of what you do with your vowels, of the way you move, of your relationship.
I thought she went to high school in Toronto and
she spent some time there, but formative years in terms of how you learn what you are in the world. She grew up around black kids, and then she went to Howard, and that's important. You go to an HBCU, and often, however you grew up, it makes you become more like the people who you were around. I know this from my own sister, frankly. I don't think she would mind hearing this. She and I actually grew up blacker than many people would think. But when Holly went to Spelman, after even the first 6 months of Spelman, there were, of course, I'm always listening for this, but there were language things, there were things of gesture, there was politics. She was immersed in 24/7 blackness in a way that I never was because I didn't go to Morehouse. Well, Kamala went to Howard, and she was, unlike my sister, Kamala was in a sorority. That is a bonding experience with women, and I think both of us know what the black sororities mean. So, yeah, she's a black lady. The South Asian part is ancillary. I think she would say the same thing, at least in private. She's black. Yeah, I don't think, and that means she's going to code switch. Most black people have these two poles that they switch between. She's going to do that to identify with audiences, and there are people online who instantly, how dare she condescend to the audience by talking blackly like that? She's going to do it over and over. It's time for us to get over it and stop making fun of her for it. Obama went through the same thing on that, but she's going to do it more, I can tell.
Why is it, let me ask you this, why is it that the blacks, quote unquote, I'm going to put it in quotes, the blacks who ascend to the highest echelon of national political office aren't, I was almost going to say, really black? That's wrong. I'm not saying
everybody's thinking it. Yeah.
That's what Donald Trump said to the National Association of Black Journalists in Chicago a week ago. That's not what I'm saying. But they are elective black. They opted in. They had choices. They opted in. They, to a certain degree, are choosing blackness and, performing blackness. Something tells me Obama spent some time in the mirror practicing.
I think he did.
When he was in college or law school or whatever, or maybe it was even earlier. And something tells me that the choices that Kamala Harris made that you just got through enumerating that are authenticators of her blackness were, deliberate, that there was to a certain degree a construction project here about building a persona, not necessarily opportunistically. If I'm black, then I'll have more opportunities or anything like that. It could be stylistically and, aesthetically and things like that. This is the kind of way I want to walk in the world. Let me order my steps accordingly. But what I want to ask is it that America can't take you if you're too black? That the first blacks to do these amazing things have to kind of be quasi-black?
No, and I think
pseudo-black.
This is the question. Are we talking about Barack Obama and Kamala Harris, and that's it? Because if we're only talking about them, then and maybe you add Colin Powell, but that's a whole different story. I think we're talking about...
Well, he was never nominated.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right. I think we're talking about what might be a coincidence, because try this as a thought experiment. Okay, you can't be too black to come up high. Everybody would love that story. But let's just roll the tape again. Let's say that Ketanji Jackson, Justice Ketanji Jackson, let's say that she was one of the people who had run. Somebody like her, somebody who looks like her, somebody with her history. Would Joe Biden not have picked her because she's too brown and she's a native-born Black person and she isn't, kind of mixed and hybrid and Hawaii and all of that? I say no. I think that he could easily have happened to have picked somebody who wasn't a mixture like Kamala. It's just that wasn't in the mix.
Oh, like Stacey Abrams or somebody.
For example, would he not have picked Stacey Abrams? No, I think that the idea that the color is determining this might have gotten old. Now, Barack Obama, here he is. He's quote unquote not really Black. Would say Tim Scott, who had a little more edge and had a little more star power, would he not have gotten in 2008 because he's just chocolate brown and there's no hybridicity? I think even in 2008, if it had been the right person, they would have gotten in. We may be dealing with coincidence here, especially now. 2008 was now 700 years ago. Today, I think it could be a chocolate brown person both of whose parents were born in St. Louis. I think that could happen now if they had star power. But I know a lot of people of a certain stripe are going to say, no, no, no. It's their mulatto quality is what has gotten them in through the door. Good story. It'd be good in an opera. Good for a novel. Edna Ferber would have written it very well. But no, I don't think that's what's going on today.
This is not my argument. This is one of our three named friends' arguments, but let me see if I can channel it. It's that a heavily Negroid featured candidate would trigger subliminal resistance in critical parts of the electorate in the swing states and so forth that would then have to be overcome. And that's just a burden that we don't need. And that then redounds to the benefit of those of the disadvantaged group whose features, skin color, shape of nose, lips, too Negroid would just be a turnoff to too many people, and they never get past the gate. They never get into the inner circle where they could be considered for that kind of thing. And that challenges us to think of heavily Negroid featured politicians who have been very successful at the national level. And I'm hard pressed to name one. Martin Luther King Jr. The late, great Martin Luther King Jr.
I think
I'm sorry.
Somebody's probably, that's already been written, and I'm sure somebody's writing it now. Yeah, Negroid features, subliminal, blah, 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 blah. Great story. And let's see where Stacey Abrams is in 10 years. And, let's see. And let's see how plausible it is that what held her back was that she had, quote unquote, Negroid features. And so it's the same thing that held back Fannie Lou Hamer. Right. Yeah. I think that it may have changed. And, Barack Obama had a very, quote unquote, Black looking wife, and that didn't seem to hold anybody back. It would just require that somebody get to a certain point who has a certain star power. Donna Brazile, for example. I mean, she's not dark, but Donna Brazile, I think, if the dice had rolled differently, could have wound up in a certain place 15 years ago. But that just didn't happen to happen. Condoleezza Rice, I would say that she has Black features, and I think she got to a certain point. If Condoleezza Rice chose to run for president right now, I think she'd get quite high up, despite the fact that she does not have a mulatto history. So I don't know. I think it's changed. I think that what you're saying, what you're quoting from the three named people, was certainly true back in the day, but this is not that day. Is my sense of it.
I wonder.
Herman Cain. I mean,
oh yeah, Herman Cain.
Kind of bit of a clown, if you ask me, but still, he was on his way. Of course, that's on the wrong side, but still, you might want to say that the racist Republicans, but they didn't seem to think so when it came to him. So,
You mentioned Justice Jackson. I'm thinking of Justice Thomas, whose Negroid features are very prominent, and I wonder whether or not his Blackness has indirectly, subconsciously, subliminally contributed to some of the antipathy toward him in some quarters. But that's going down a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, did you see all the brouhaha over the Zoom call with affiliates based on race and gender? White dudes for Harris, black women for Harris, kind of thing like that. And complaints about from conservatives that if Trump supporters had had a white guys for Trump Zoom call, come on, we know what the story would be. How's it okay for there to be white guys for Kamala, but not okay for there to be white guys for Donald?
Because Kamala belongs to the subordinated race, I suppose. And so white guys for Donald Trump, that would be a power play. That would be white supremacy, of course. Whereas Kamala can have these affinity groups. Black guys for Trump, see, that's okay. White women for Trump doesn't work, but I think that's why it is. But the very fact that there are these affinity groups, I think, is an indication of how far we've come. What I was more struck by was poor Miss Ariel Fodor. Did you see the quote unquote white lady who was at the head of the white women for Kamala, who gave the little lecture at the top of it about how black people are to be listened to? You listen with respect. You don't speak over them. You don't contradict them. And she's this, probably 30 and a bit. I think she is or was a kindergarten teacher. So
that's her introducing the Zoom call? Is
yeah.
That? Yeah, I saw Matt Taibbi commenting about that. I didn't actually see the intro, though.
Yeah, it's worth watching. And, social media keeps on snipping stills of her where her face looks stupid, making her look like an idiot. She's not an idiot. If you watch her, she's just somebody who clearly is a school teacher and has a certain cadence, and she's trying to explain in a friendly way what it is to be a good white person. But it's all very 2019.
Robin DiAngelo-esque?
No, because this Ariel Fodor smiles more. She's trying to work her way into people's hearts and not to be processed as threatening or as prosecutorial, whereas, with Robin DiAngelo, she's cracking a whip and, telling you, oddly enough, she's cracking a whip and saying, I'm not criticizing you, but different tone than her. But she still, I understand where Ariel Fodor was coming from, but I am frankly nauseated by her idea that black people cannot be contradicted about anything, that to be black is to always be right. And I'm sure she genuinely doesn't realize how condescending that is. She has truly drunk the, hard woke Kool-Aid. But that was the tone that was set in the White Ladies for Kamala Zoom session. And so if you're going to be for Kamala, at least some white ladies are going to be listening to people like that. But there you go. What really struck me was how much less we hear from that person outside of academia and the arts these days, this Ariel Fodor. I thought, wow, this is bringing me back to the pandemic and George Floyd and this sort of person who acquired a certain prominence. But that kind of person doesn't have the power they used to. But you should take a look at her because she can stand as a time capsule of what made an awful lot of people very impatient starting in 2020. If you think about true black dignity. It's hard to watch. Although I repeat, I'm not condemning her as a bad person. I can put myself into her head, but she doesn't understand that nobody wants it to be said of them that they can't be contradicted. Or if they do feel that way, there's something wrong with them.
I wonder how you'd react to this speculation or thought on my part, which is people are playing with fire and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the risk that they're taking. When they essentialize these racial categories and make them the basis of political mobilization. First black woman to become president of the United States, as if that really meant something. The fact of her blackness, what does it mean? I mean, beyond possibly being the subject of inspirational children's books for identity-focused families trying to raise their young kids. See, you too can be president. What does it really mean? I mean, how does it relate to, and then we could tick off the issues of the day from the border to universal health care to the war in the Middle East to taxes to whatever. And I'm not hearing anything from her about that. And I'm not hearing any connection from her between those positions and Black people on whose behalf, as a representative, she is meant to be ascendant. I think, we're playing with fire when we have white dudes for Harris, thinking that you can do that without, that is to say, do what? Mobilize white people, men in this case, self-consciously acting on the basis of their identity on behalf now of Harris, without inviting I'm a white dude, but I'm not for Harris. I'm a white dude for you. No, you won't let me say that. If I say it, you're going to blacklist me and you're going to kick me off Twitter and you're going to take my YouTube and whatnot. So I won't say it, but I'll think it and I'll act on it. And we double down when, as Coleman Hughes would argue, the real thing that we should be doing is trying to move away from the racial categorization reflex and into something else. That's a hard move. That's not going to happen overnight. That's going to require a lot of effort and subtle public leadership and all of that. But we're moving in the wrong direction and we're doing it willy-nilly. And I might just close that out by saying, wokeness is dying, as you know. Wokeness is taking body blow after body blow after body blow. Heads are rolling from presidents of Ivy League universities on down, and laws are being passed at the state level that people push back against, but that I think to some degree reflect a weariness in the populace with all of this race talk. So it this has a feeling of maybe this is a last gasp kind of thing. And if she loses this election, that would be another nail in the coffin of woke racism. I don't know how you feel about that.
I feel you have to choose what hill you're going to die on, because there's stuff I see, in my life surrounded by certain kinds of white people and wonderful people, almost all of them. But there is a kind of educated white person in particular who really drank in that 2020 message. And they're not zealots. They understand nuance, but they learn that to be good people, they have to think of Black people as hothouse flowers to an extent. And these are people who I know, who I interact with. And I can tell, and I have been told by others to an extent. Some of them, they think I'm just swell, but when it comes to the way I think about race, they don't quite know what to do with it, because they know that I'm very impatient with that kind of view. And they know that there are other people like me. And what they say, and I think they really believe it, is that I and other people like me downplay race, that there's something that we miss. And it's very easy for you and me to go harumph about that. I don't think that I downplay race in my, for example, New York Times columns or here. But what they're thinking is something like what happened to Sonya Masseys, a Black woman in, I think, Illinois, who, 3 weeks ago, she's mentally unwell, and she calls cops, and the white cops come and eventually end up just shooting her dead in her own house out of a rather peculiar sense that there was going to be some danger involving a pot of boiling water on the stove, and the details aren't all in, but it seems very difficult to imagine that this shooting was in any way justified. Now, this is the problem with the Sonya Massey killing. I am unaware that we know that nothing similar has ever happened to a white person. And I haven't had time to check. But the minute something like that happens, the national story is that this is what happened to somebody because they were Black. But that technically doesn't make any sense unless you go through the records and see whether there are cases where a white person has called the cops because they thought they were in some kind of danger and there was some kind of confusion and the cops killed them instead.
You can be sure that has happened.
It must have. I find it highly unlikely. But
you just have to call up Peter Moskos and ask him for the chapter and verse on it.
Or somebody, he probably would pull one
somebody
right.
Like that. Yeah,
or, the Washington Post database.
It's a big country. There are 330 million people here.
Yeah. So you have to check. But that person who is kind of looking at me out of the side of their eye is thinking about that. That made national news. And they're thinking, well, what if racism isn't important? Why not? What about what happened to that woman? Everybody shakes their head. And so my point is that the reason that those affinity groups make sense to so many people is because there is a sense that to be white is to bear the burden of being indirectly responsible for what happened to Sonya Massey. And I don't know that we can cut through that anytime soon, as frustrating as it is. These people don't know that for every cop killing that they've heard of, something very similar happened to a white person. As I always say, the only one where I don't know of an equivalent, Tony Timpa, George Floyd, anyone it happened to somebody white, except for Tamir Rice, the little boy. He's like 12 and he has a toy gun and the cops come and shoot him. I don't know of a case like that with a little white.
Oh, yeah. There are cases like that, too.
Oh, are there?
Where,
okay.
Yeah, kids, I don't know if they're 12, they might have been 14,
Right.
but where the kid is white and it's not a real functional weapon, but
then there you go.
He's thought to be a threat.
And they get killed, which is unjustifiable. But the nation will never know that. The resistance to discussing that in the media is considerable. And so we have to deal with it. And so therefore you get white dudes for Kamala. That's what that is. I share your feeling, but what else are we going to have given what people are exposed to and the way people are trained to think? So,
John and I often talk about higher education on this podcast. Obviously, that's the universe we both inhabit. And why not? It's a topic that has moved front and center of late at both the state and national level. Attacks on free speech, lack of viewpoint diversity on campus, soaring tuition, the erosion of academic standards. And we all saw the disturbing images of encampments, occupations, and disruptions on campuses last spring. Universities are bracing for more of the same as students return this fall. America's higher education system is in crisis. So, with all that's going on, to whom can one turn as a trusted resource of all issues related to higher ed reform? The American Council of Trustees and Alumni is one source we want to strongly recommend as a credible and respected voice on all these issues. We're pleased to have ACTA sponsoring this episode. Some of ACTA's latest work is focused on helping university leadership address campus unrest and the inherent risk of bowing to pressure to boycott and divest from Israel. And as it has for decades, ACTA is also, once again, calling for a national civic education revival in America. In partnership with College Pulse, ACTA has surveyed 3,000 college students, exposing serious knowledge deficits about rudimentary American history and civics. Not surprising, only 19% of American colleges require a course in American history to graduate. If you care deeply about these issues, as John and I do, you really must know more about the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. Start by looking them up on the web at goacta.org. That's goacta.org. And follow them on Twitter and Facebook. Now, you were, if I recall correctly, kind of tongue-in-cheek lobbying that she choose Cory Booker as a vice president. You thought that would make for a fun, unique, interesting shock to the American political system. It didn't happen. She chose the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, who's come out swinging this last week since his selection as vice president. He's been, everywhere on the media. He's been giving speeches. He's taken on J.D. Vance, taken on Donald Trump. He's the white guy on the ticket. We have a diverse ticket. We got a white guy. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, we're talking about this woman who runs a liquor store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to the extent that he makes sense to her, both on a cultural level, white heartland guy, and on a policy level, and probably a little bit more the former than the latter. If that can help put Kamala over the edge, then I think that would be a wonderful thing. It's not what I was expecting. And I think the idea that she didn't pick Adam Shapiro because he was Jewish is rather.
Josh Shapiro, excuse me. His name is Josh Shapiro.
I wonder if my friend Adam Shapiro is watching. Josh Shapiro, because he's Jewish. I think that is extremely hasty, although that's going to be an interesting battle. But she made an.
Excuse me for interrupting, John. Do you think it was his Jewishness and his support for Israel that precluded his being selected?
I'm sure that it was a thought, especially since he would have clearly been a help in the very crucial state of Pennsylvania. It must have been a thought. And if it was, talk about flinty pragmatism, and it can rub you the wrong way. But I find it hard to imagine that was the main reason. I can certainly imagine that she would be looking for somebody who was a little bit older and who had, quote unquote, the folksy touch. And the idea being that might help to push things ahead, especially in those three crucial states. And so we'll see how it plays out. Another thing I don't know if she knew this at the time, but he is good with an audience. He is good at creating memes. He is the one who came up with the weird thing, which I frankly think was very deft. That is a very subtle and effective thing to lob at people like J.D. Vance. That not just that you're wrong or you're a threat to democracy, but you're odd. Frankly, in our climate, that might be a necessary tactic. And so I'll take him. We'll see.
Odd, that's a relative statement. Odd compared to what? I mean, there are a lot of J.D. Vances out there. He's odd compared to cocktail party circuit in the New York City, San Francisco orbit?
No, I think they mean odd as just American people, that this whole, we don't need to get into it, or maybe we do, but this whole MAGA ideology is not getting back to basics, but it's peculiar. And a lot of the hangups could be thought of as hangups rather than policy.
So how's that different from deplorables? I mean, why isn't it the same strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Clinging to their guns and their Bible because they can't deal with the modern world. That was Obama.
That's aimed more at ordinary people, though. Whereas the weird, I think, is aimed more at politicians and what they're trying to get people interested in. Good point, though.
So here's what I see. I see, the opposite of Michelle Obama's, when they go low, we go high. I see the Eric Holder's retort, when they go low, we kick them. And I think the Democrats have decided that the way to deal with Trump's vitriol and attacks, she's not very intelligent or whatever, is to respond in kind, to find a comparable way of conveying contempt and disgust and disdain for the other side and promoting those sentiments in one's followers. I mean, when Trump says she's not intelligent, what is he trying to suggest? I mean, it's borderline racist, isn't it? And isn't he kind of dog whistling to people out there who think, she's a Black woman, she went to Howard University, she couldn't be that bright, she didn't go to, whatever. And I think this weird stuff in the couch, the couch meme?
Mm-hmm.
Vance inaccurately is alleged to have written a passage in his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, in which he confesses to making love as a horny adolescent to a couch. It's not in the memoir. The whole thing is a made up, Twitter hoax about him, and it was given reference in a speech that Tim Walz made recently after his being appointed as Kamala Harris's vice presidential candidate. But I mean, isn't that really? Aren't they just giving Trump and company as good as they have to take from them?
I'm sorry, but I think it's necessary. I understand comedy and good manners and dignity, but we live in a different era. We live in an era where the soundbite is available in our phones all the time, and so that becomes part of the language. We live in a post-ironic era, and the Republican candidate is an excellent stand-up comedian. Notice I said something good about him in a way. He does great stand-up, and that's his version of campaigning. And he's not going to stop, and he's good at it. Now, it's one thing to say when they go low, we go high. But if what that ends up looking like is that you haven't got anything to say, frankly, if somebody is going to call you silly little names, if you have a knack for coming up with silly little names of your own without overdoing it, throw it back at them. I think that that is necessary, more effective, and actually almost a form of preserving dignity in itself. Go a little low. This is 2024.
That's a good speech, John. Lock him
Thank
up.
you.
Lock him up. They're chanting
Good.
at Democratic rallies. Lock him up. You think that's good?
I think that, and not just because it's him.
It wasn't good when Trump's rallies were chanting it about Hillary Rodham Clinton, but it's good now. How's that? How's it good?
Because it's going to be the tone of the entire campaign, and he's very good at it. And sometimes, and this is what I feel in general. Sometimes you've got to answer. Sometimes you've got to answer like with like. There's something that goes on in our culture, for example, where you're called defensive if you defend yourself. Now, it's one thing if you defend yourself too much, but that has watered down to you defend yourself against charges. And if you use more than 2 sentences, you're defensive, and defensive is considered an insult. No. To an extent, if somebody calls you something, if somebody says that you're ridiculous, why don't you respond back with a way in which they're ridiculous? Like, for example, there was a kid when I was 14 who was giving me trouble. Not physical bullying, but I was a little awkward, and frankly, so was he. And he decided to make a lot of it. I think he had some sort of nickname for me, which I genuinely don't remember. And my father told me to say something to him. He said, and this is going to come off as condescending, but my father was not a condescending man, even if I can be a condescending person. He said, next time he steps to you like that, just tell him that, I may be this and I may be that, but one day you're going to be asking me for a job. And, it was a fair retort in terms of what the two of us were like. And
how old were you, John? How old were you?
I'm 14, and some people are imagining me saying this to a black kid, and in which case I look like a true asshole. I should say that he was Chinese American, and he's doing this, but he wasn't. I have to be careful with this, but he was just an okay student. It wasn't somebody saying this with a protractor in his hand, and so I used this. I remember we were in the bathroom, and he called me that again, and I said, "You know what, Rex?" His name was Rex. I said, Rex, it may be true that I'm this, and I may be wearing the wrong kind of pants, which I was. I was wearing these plaid pants. But I said, you know what? One day, and I added something. I said, and we both know it. You're going to be asking me for a job. And his face went, and he just turned around and left, and that motherfucker never bothered me again. Sometimes you have to do something like that because it meant that he stopped it. And I really do think that there's something to the Star Wars missile shield on this. Just make it clear that you can defend yourself. They think you're ridiculous. Well, you think they're ridiculous too. Don't make it look like you're walking away with your tail between your legs or that you're some stone statue. Because the latter in particular doesn't work these days. We're too post-ironic for that. You think that it's not productive and it makes the other side look childish?
No, I think it's a hard problem. I mean, just from a practical managing a campaign, you want to win. If you don't win, you can't govern. What does it take to win? You're trading off the efficacy of a certain tactic against the poisoning of the well. When you use the tactic, you contribute to a general degradation of the climate of discourse that could be leading us to a bad place. There is such a thing as sort of the prisoner's dilemma, the kind of game theory thing where the best thing to do for both players leads them into a situation which is the worst situation they could possibly be in. Mm-hmm. But each one is doing the thing which, given what the other is doing, is best for him to do. Unilateral disarmament is not an effective strategy. Multilateral disarmament requires a treaty. That means people have to somehow get on the same page. They have to have an interest higher than the result of the competition between them, and we don't have any mechanism for facilitating that kind of multilateral disarmament, that kind of treaty of peace between the parties. Let us not turn our country into a political sewer, but let us not cultivate the worst in ourselves, that's a pretty hard sell in the middle of a presidential campaign.
Well, Glenn, let me ask you something then. Last thing I read about Trump, and before we started this morning, was that he has claimed that he was in a helicopter with Willie Brown investigating fire damage in California in 2018. He was in a plane with Willie Brown. And Willie Brown discussed Kamala Harris with him and indicated that he was not very happy with Kamala Harris, that he had some real resentments, and that then the helicopter almost went down. They were all really scared. Glenn, do you know what really happened? He was in a plane with Jerry Brown, not Willie Brown. I mean, not even close. Gavin Newsom was there. They never discussed Kamala Harris, of course. And Willie Brown has never said anything of the sort about Kamala Harris in the 30 years since they have no longer been together. Trump told that story now. One, did he really think it was Willie Brown rather than Jerry Brown? In which case, is one not supposed to say something about certain, mental hours? Or if it isn't that a little, shouldn't that be called out as not just lying, but that's weird? You mix up Jerry Brown and Willie Brown. Is it going low?
They don't look anything alike. I'll concede that point.
They are extremely dissimilar people.
And the memory plays funny tricks on people, and we can reproduce these. Hillary Clinton was supposed to have had to land in a plane under fire where there was no evidence of that. And right. Joe Biden is supposed to have been at Mandela's whatever and, gotten arrested in South Africa.
It happens to all of them.
And confusing Willie Brown and Jerry Brown would be a cognitive lapse, that's for sure. If he was genuinely confused about it, I'm inclined to think, no, that's not a mistake anybody could make. That's a fabrication.
Also, the helicopter did not almost go down. It didn't happen. And so, what do you do?
Much better story when the helicopter is in danger of crashing.
Excellent.
Much better story.
With Willie Brown looking over fire.
I have heard that Donald Harris, that's the father of Kamala Harris, that's the black part of Kamala Harris, that's the Jamaican Marxist economist, is alienated from his daughter because of her flippant reference to her Jamaican heritage. And, like everybody's always smoking weed or something like that. Now, I could be wrong. This could be apocryphal. I am not alleging it. I'm just saying this is a kind of rumor that's out there. And her mother passed away, did she?
She must have, or we would hear from her.
Yeah. The father is still living, I'm pretty sure, but we've heard nothing from him, and I think their relations might not be that great. So it could be that Trump is combining a helicopter flight with a guy named Brown with a rumor that somebody formerly close to Kamala Harris is no longer enthusiastic about her and that they are estranged. But we are in the fever swamps here. We're in the fever swamps. All right, John. I think that's a conversation here at the Glenn Show. Thanks a lot for your time, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, Glenn.